I do recommend what we call an age appropriate version of the truth. And so it is being honest, but it's also being honest about what's right in front of a kid. Just because a cancer is advanced doesn't mean that we need to be talking about dying right now, but we might be having realistic outcomes. The goal is not to get rid of the cancer. We know that the cancer won't go away, but what we're trying to do is keep the cancer calm and quiet for as long as possible so that I can live well. And if something changes, I'll update you. And so then the kids start to trust that they will be updated when there's changes along the way.
Welcome to the Inheritance of Hope podcast. Every day, 562 children lose a parent to terminal illness. They shouldn't have to face that alone. You can pretend to avoid the painful realities of illness, grief, and death, or you can deal with the real stuff in caring community. On the podcast, people in Inheritance of Hope's community share raw, personal stories of pain, trials, and the shadow of death, which are also stories of joy in terminal illness. Find more Inheritance of Hope community at inheritanceofhope.org. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Inheritance of Hope podcast. I'm Ellie, your host, and today we will be unpacking the topic of balancing hope and honesty and how to do that well while your world might be flipped upside down and you're maybe just trying to survive day by day. We are here to provide some insight and some examples and just equipping you to have these conversations with your family, with your kids. This is a teaching moment. We aren't the experts. We aren't here to tell you what's right or what's wrong. Hopefully just give you some language and some framework to view things through. So we have a guest here who will be able to speak on this really well. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Hi, my name is Kelsey Mora, and I'm a dual certified child life specialist and licensed clinical professional counselor. I'm the chief clinical officer at Pickles Group, which is a nonprofit that provides free peer-to-peer support and resources to kids and teens who have a parent with cancer. So all of my work has really been built around supporting families through illness and grief. I also work in private practice. I'm the author of the DOT Method, which is an interactive workbook to teach kids about cancer. And I journey with a lot of families, both in the hospital, outside of the hospital, at home, in a group setting. And so this is a common question and concern that parents in particular, but a lot of just humans in general want to know is how do we navigate what's in front of us with hope as well.
Yeah. Right. In the midst of all of that experience, both in the hospital, in private practice, with Pickles Group, I'm sure you've seen this play out a lot of different ways, different families handling it with your unique perspective, and you've kind of seen how things have played out. Walk us through, if you are in the midst of something as difficult as navigating an illness or a cancer diagnosis or a huge life change, what is your number one approach of how do you hold that tension of both being realistic and hopeful at the same time?
I think it does help to lead with honesty to make sure that everyone's operating from a shared language and understanding of what's going on. And with kids in particular, it's a lot of bite-sized conversations. So kids really need to know what's happening right now, and then they can start processing and making sense of it. And so having that shared language can really help everyone then get into their feelings of what are you hoping for, or what's important to you, or what feelings are coming up. And so I do recommend starting with some sense of honesty just to get everyone aligned on what we're even dealing with in the first place. And that can then open the door to emotions and grappling with what's important. Talking about even dying can mean we can talk about living. And so that is hope. And it's figuring out, how do we make meaning of something so challenging and so difficult? But that has to start with what do we do with this information to make it meaningful and to feel connected throughout the challenges that are ahead of us.
When kids have information, it's so impressive to hear the questions that they have and see how much that they understand and that they grasp. And so giving children that information allows them to ask the questions and have a moment to ponder as a family. With children specifically, how have you seen that at play and how to equip families to engage their children with realistic conversations?
Kids are amazing and inspiring, and depending on their age, it's gonna look really different, but obviously with younger kids, joy and playfulness can bring so much hope just having kids around and how they bring humor and lighten a situation, and they may have really unexpected questions that are either very matter of fact or very surprising because they're thinking about things so differently than the adults around them, and that can be really humbling. It can be like, okay, yeah, you're really curious about this thing or you're really bothered by this thing, and it helps you get into their own world and headspace of like what they're thinking about and what they need. And I'm thinking about one family in particular who's one of our founding families at Pickles Group, the Smith family. Their dad died 4 years ago from glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor. And they have four kids. So the youngest is quite little, and then all the way to a teenager who's now in nearing college. And he actually gave a speech at one of our Pickles events about how hope changes. And he says, in the beginning, I was hoping for, my dad to get better. And then I was hoping for more good days and walks with my dad. And then I was hoping to live on his legacy. For him, it was a lot through Pickles Group. And so he talks about how hope shifts and changes. And we've really incorporated that into our curriculum at Pickles Group. We help kids figure out what am I hoping for now and how might that look different as I get older or as my parents' condition changes. And so it's so inspiring to just hear directly from kids because yeah, they have a lot of perspective when it comes to these topics and ways of navigating it themselves that can be really helpful to the adults around them.
One question I loved asking when I was working with kids and families in the hospital is, what do you know about X? Maybe asking a child who's about to go into surgery, tell me what you know about what's happening today, and allowing them this open field to tell you what they know and what questions they have. I think that's a great way to just gauge where are they at. Like, what are you hoping for in this moment? What are you anxious about? That's a great question or a talking prompt to have in your back pocket to start having those conversations within your family unit. And I think knowing what people are aware of is a great starting point to then dive in.
It's a great question to figure out where kids are at instead of jumping in with all this information because that can help us to know like, oh, they already know a lot that I can just build on, or we've got some misconceptions that we need to clarify. That's actually not what's happening. And so that's a great suggestion of opening that question and even just asking kids, what's important to you? Knowing what we do know, what's important to you? And I always encourage families to actually dream really big about their wishes and then we can scale back. So I've had families that are like, "No, I really wish I could travel the world. And I know that's maybe not possible. Well, let's bring the world home and let's do a France day where we eat, French food and learn about France and do a tour around the world without getting on an airplane." Sometimes it's helping families dream big and then pulling back to something that's more realistic. It's not always a no, we can't do that. It's a yes, but it might look different. I think about parents where maybe dance parties are a common thing in a family and a parent is not able to dance physically, but maybe they become the DJ or the judge or they sit and watch and, hold something that is participating in some way, but we sometimes get stuck when we think it's all like changed and different and impossible. But there's a lot of opportunity to kind of dream big and then scale back from there.
Yeah, that's a great example of holding both hope and being realistic with what's going on. You'll have some restrictions on what you can do, and there are still things that you can do in the midst of each circumstance. So, yeah, if someone's listening to this and they resonate with what's being shared and it feels maybe like an ambiguous thought of holding that tension between hope and honesty, what are some realistic things that they can start doing to look at what's going on in their world and make some changes or move forward in this conversation?
I think a lot about building a legacy, and I know Inheritance of Hope is great and offers a lot of resources for that, but helping families understand that all of these small moments are opportunities to build memories and build a legacy. It doesn't have to be big or elaborate to be meaningful. You can really scale back and focus on those small little moments and connections that are lasting memories and keepsakes for kids. And so, regardless of outcomes, those are memories that are valuable from a difficult time, valuable after someone has died. It's meaningful no matter what. And so, even lowering or shifting expectations of having a mac and cheese night is exactly what our family needs tonight. And that is meaningful, and kids will remember that. Or just little things can go a really long way. And so, I think starting small and really understanding what's important to kids. If we talk about the hard stuff, we could talk about the fun stuff too. Knowing what we know, knowing that we're not really sure what this weekend's going to bring, what's important to us. Maybe we have a movie night, or maybe we have group family hugs every day, or I don't know, whatever that looks like for whatever families are listening and need. It's just starting small and leading with kids' interests too can be really important for figuring that out together.
Yeah. And with your work with Pickles Group, what are some resources that you offer or some programs that equip families to hold that tension and be realistic, but also joyful and hopeful in the midst of it?
We're just really focused on having honest conversations. That's one of our three pillars. We do that through various ways. We have free resources to help parents start talking to their kids about cancer. We're working on more resources to help parents talk about anticipatory grief and loss. And then we also have a lot of webinars where I provide educational content, but we also highlight our youth voices, our parent voices, so that they can share their lived experience. And those can be really meaningful. And all of our previous programs are on our YouTube channel. And then we're constantly rolling out more. And then we have all these peer groups that focus on coping skills and connection. And a lot of the activities that we do in those groups start to translate to home. So we have families tell us we started doing sweet and sour at our dinner table, or we added a gratitude circle before bed. And those are traditions that we have in our programming, but it really helps build that muscle of having honest conversations, talking about feelings, practicing coping, and then parents start to see their kids doing that more at home. So it all kind of comes back full circle. We also give kids a safe space to ask hard questions, and we share those answers with the whole community. So parents start to see how to have these conversations and what conversations their kids are having, so that they become hopefully less scared, more comfortable, more open over time. And we talk about planting seeds. A lot of our resources, it's like a moment in time where we're planting a seed that hopefully grows long after we see it. But we do hear those major outcomes is feeling more comfortable talking about these things and navigating it as a family. And that includes connection too, figuring out how to stay connected through these hard things, which is where a lot of the joy and playfulness and hope comes in. So those are the more resources that we have.
We will link some of those resources in the show notes. So if you are wondering how to engage with your kids on some of these topics, or even just initiate some new ideas within your family, check out those resources. I know they're really incredible, and curated really well. And one common question that I hear, that I'm sure you hear too, is how honest should I be with my child? So let's say for Inheritance of Hope, our families are where one parent is diagnosed with end stage terminal cancer, or something that will result in the death of that parent. So with something like that, they might have young kids and they don't know. Do I tell them that I have cancer, that I am sick, that I'm going to die? This all feels so overwhelming. I don't know where to start. So, with this lens of hope and honesty, what would your suggestion be for a parent on how honest to be with your child?
We cover a lot of that in some of our content, and we do have one webinar that's how to talk to kids about incurable cancer. And so I know there are a lot of different terms that are used in that space around terminal advanced cancer and curable cancer. And the reality is, we see so many families with late stage cancer that is deemed terminal live a really long life with different treatments and advancements in medical care. I do recommend what we call an age appropriate version of the truth. And so it is being honest, but it's also being honest about what's right in front of a kid. Just because a cancer is advanced doesn't mean that we need to be talking about dying right now, but we might be having realistic outcomes. The goal is not to get rid of the cancer. We know that the cancer won't go away, but what we're trying to do is keep the cancer calm and quiet for as long as possible so that I can live well. And if something changes, I'll update you. And so then the kids start to trust that they will be updated when there's changes along the way. You don't have to have that whole conversation all at once. If a kid asks, like, are you going to die? They might be ready for more of that information that, yes, I don't think I'm going to be able to survive this cancer, but what I do know is that I don't know when or how long. The medicine is helping me live longer right now, but it might not help me live forever. And so there's a lot of nuance within that of what's happening right now, what treatments are available. And then all of this is to build a foundation of openness and honesty so that if and when there's a sudden change, you already have established that trust with your kids to be able to then build on that conversation. Hey, buddy, I have an update. There's been a change. I went to the doctor and it looks like my cancer is growing. And unfortunately, there's no more medicines available, right? So you're building on a conversation that has already started. I know that's a little bit convoluted, but I think when parents ask, how honest to be, it depends. And the age appropriate version of the truth really gets at like, what do they need to know right now? That is honest, but it might not be every single detail or worry that you have. And what that does is just establishes that openness so that kids then feel more comfortable asking questions and following up when they need to.
It's just building trust, knowing that you are providing enough information so that your child feels that they can come to you with questions. A lot of times people want to protect their children. And when the reality is really hard, we think protecting our kids means we don't tell them anything, move on as if nothing's happening. But your child is picking up on changes, and it might feel scary for them because they don't know what those changes are, and it's the ambiguity that does not build trust. Have seen the most successful way of engaging in this is that age appropriate honesty. That's the whole point of this episode, is being honest and hopeful, and it can coexist. One doesn't cancel out the other. Any other final thoughts on this topic?
Well, I just think hope is so much about establishing what someone is hoping for. I remember working in the pediatric ICU, and a lot of times parents would say things like, just do everything that you can. And we would talk a lot about with the palliative care and hospice care teams that most of the time when a parent says do everything you can, they mean do everything you can that's going to help. And unfortunately, there may be a limit to what that means. But if survival is not a realistic outcome, then hope has to shift, right? And then are we hoping for more good days? Are we hoping for comfort care? So much of figuring out hope and how to have hope is what are we hoping for? And I'm thinking again about the same teen I talked about earlier who was really concerned about whether or not his dad was going to make it to his birthday. And that conversation allowed us to explore what would that look like if he did and what would that look like if he didn't, because we don't know, right? This was September and his birthday was in, I think, October. And so it was uncertain if dad would make it to his birthday. But it gave us a chance to talk about how could we honor that now, even if you got bonus birthday with your dad. I think it's figuring out what am I hoping for? Is it within the realm of realistic or possible? How does it need to shift? And so I do believe that families need to figure out what they're hoping for and figure out how to achieve that within the balance of what's right in front of them. It's tricky. It's not so black and white. It's a delicate balance, but there's never no hope. It just means that what is that hope and how can it evolve over time?
There's never no hope. I love that phrase. I'm going to use that. But thank you, Kelsey, for this conversation. And we will direct questions and any desire for resources to the Pickles Group page that will be linked in the show notes. So please take advantage of that. And we hope that this has been a really beneficial episode for you. So thanks so much for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks for having me.